But we have to bring in our European correspondent, Pippa Lamb from Sweet Capital. Welcome to the stream. How are you doing?
What's going on?
Hey guys, how's it going? Coming in from Europe.
It's great. Is your Starlink connection strong? I know they don't have broadband out there in the old continent.
You know what? We're all just trying to get ourselves to The Hague and get some of that defense procurement that we're now going to be spending on. So yeah, hopefully the Starlink will make it here. No, hopefully hear me okay.
Hopefully. Give us the breakdown of the latest news from NATO.
Yeah, so it's exciting. I mean, I think that pretty much all global press has been focused on this morning. You know, President Trump and the current US administration has really managed to do, thank you very much, has managed to do the thing that no US leader has actually managed to do before, which is to get Europe and US's allies here to actually open up their wallets and increase their annual commitment to percentage of GDP on defense spending. So, you know, this is something that dates back to, I think, 2017. I mean, obviously, a lot of American presidents have really pushed for this before. This isn't a new ask from the US side, but certainly this is the first time we've really seen some progress. I mean, to put this in context, the US has really paid about 2/3 of the NATO budget for the recent years. So it's really been upon Europe to really increase how much they're contributing, and so I think it's certainly a big win for the US, but also a big win for national security across the West and its allies. So yeah, definitely good sentiments here on the ground, and I think certainly when it comes to if you see how Trump's mood has changed from when he was boarding that helicopter a couple of days ago to some of the comments he was making after Secretary General Rutter's comments. I think that the US is in a really interesting position now, and so is NATO.
Did we ever figure out what the NATO chief claims he didn't call Trump daddy?
No, I don't know.
Did you see all this?
No, break this down.
I don't know if you saw anything. I couldn't tell what was fake news. Did you have any insight there? The NATO.
So I saw the headlines.
There's an ABC News headlines from yesterday. It says NATO Secretary General calls Trump "quote unquote" daddy.
Wait, yeah, and then the White House put out a video about this. I don't know.
But then the NATO Secretary General, I guess, came out and denies it.
Yeah, the White House, this is on the official page, put out a 1-minute video, and it just and the comment on X is "Daddy's home. Hey, Daddy." President Donald J. Trump attended the NATO summit in The Hague, Netherlands. And then the Secretary General came out and said "Daddy" referred to U.S. leadership, not Trump. Okay.
So
yes,
still.
The official White House social media never disappoints. I have to say that I always have my expectations, and they surpass.
It's pretty wild.
I mean, I did go back and watch the original clip to try and understand the analogy, and effectively Trump was comparing some of the geopolitical conflicts right now to children playing in the playground, and then of course Secretary General Rutter then comes and says, and sometimes if people are being children, then he brings in the daddy analogy, and of course in the press conference Trump just jumped on that. He said, "Yeah, they called me daddy." He just ran with it. And as we saw on the White House account this morning, I think there's reels, there's YouTubes. They really went for it. So.
On NATO defense spending, there's actually a graphic that is pretty interesting to pull up here. It is the United States is paying like more than 2/3. So in 2023, NATO's budget was 1.3 trillion. 860 billion of that came from the United States. Germany was the next second highest with 68 billion, so less than 1/10. Then the UK at 65 billion, France at 56 billion, Italy at 31 billion, and then a bunch of other countries in the 10 to 5 to 8 billion range. Canada's at 30 billion. And so, this is a big change. I guess the current benchmark is 2% of GDP. And this is, I guess, it is an agreement to try and get to 5%. Now that's going to roll out over the next decade to 2035. And I mean, the real key takeaway is that now Trump is publicly supporting NATO. He's been very against it, but he's in favor. And then there was also some questions about the shift away from the focus on Russia and Ukraine. Trump wants to end the conflict there. We can talk about that, but then eventually I want to get into what this means for startups.
Yeah, I think what's also interesting is I have the same questions as you, right? So they put out these headline numbers. It all sounds very good. We all agree that there needed to be more of a balance between the US spending versus the rest of NATO. And I think what was really encouraging to see in terms of how this is going to impact markets is if you look at comments that came out from the UK this morning from Prime Minister Starmer, he actually said, okay, well, we've got this target by 2035. We are going to dedicate up to 5% of GDP spending on defense. But he actually then gave us further information and said that actually, if you look at where we see the national security needs now, we actually expect to surpass 4% of spending by 2027 or in 2027. So that's, to me, that's a great signal to markets that this isn't some sort of lofty target that they're going to try and hit and push out and sort of relabel things as defense or really kind of be very gradual about how they're deploying and how they're going to procure. I see this and I think, okay, Europe is really serious about this. The UK is currently, just for perspective, at around 2.3% of its GDP. So it's slightly above that 2% benchmark. But the fact to go from 2.3% to 4% by 2027 is really encouraging. And I know certainly on the ground, we're already seeing quite a lot of increased interest in European defense plays. Some of the existing, I suppose, call them incumbents, but the Andurils of the world are getting really excited about this market, and less so from a change on their side, but a fact that the UK and Europe is potentially finally actually putting its money where its mouth is in terms of how it wants to procure and how it really wants to beef up its national security efforts.
Yeah,
the question will be, how does that budget actually get distributed between new players like Helsing, which Daniel at Spotify had a nicely timed investment into that.
Actually.
It's almost like he had a crystal ball or something. And then new kind of the new and
he's kind of
American
he's
players
kind of like the daddy
Anduril.
of the Nordic tech scene.
Yeah,
Think of him as that.
I'm sure the NATO chief would probably refer to him that way.
Yeah.
And then Anduril all the way down to the Boeings and the Lockheed
I
Martins.
mean, the four companies that I think are really interesting to study in this like as this development plays out are probably Rheinmetall, Helsing, Anduril, and Palantir, and they all kind of represent very different strategies but you could see money flowing to any of them, but then there are also decisions with all of those. Obviously Rheinmetall, very old company, legacy incumbent in Europe, and so easier to get across a deal done because they have all the infrastructure there. Helsing's kind of the up and comer, Anduril's the hot American company, Palantir's founded by some Germans, but ultimately an American company. What are you seeing?
And it's interesting, even Rheinmetall has been on this crazy run.
Oh yeah,
it's $432 a share. In 2022, you could have bought it for $30 a share.
Wow. And what is it now?
And 430.
410x.
So yeah, up tremendously. Even this year is up 250%.
Yeah. So what are you thinking about? I mean, this seems like a massive military budget increase in Europe. How serious is the rhetoric around the desire for homegrown defense technology solutions in Europe broadly?
So, I mean, I think, Jordi, as well, on your point on Rheinmetall, I think you also want to pull up the chart for Saab. That's been rallying, a lot. So you're definitely seeing some allocation from institutions into existing incumbents. But I think for me and other members of the startup and venture community, what we're really asking is seriously is this going to impact the pre-IPO and private markets? And I think what's very interesting here is you also saw Anduril announce a partnership with Rheinmetall, I think about a week ago. So you're certainly going to see some, there's plenty to go around in terms of the market opportunity. And I think the sentiment is really beginning to shift now in terms of, both investors and governments opening their wallets. But I do think that, on one hand, I do still tend to agree with this argument that defense primes are really hard businesses. There is always going to be, in my view, a monopolistic or oligopolistic element to how these markets run. It's not that we're going to come out and see, 10 Andurils all spring up. I think ultimately a defense prime doesn't spring up overnight. And as you mentioned, you already have Anduril in the US, who, by the way, has been very present in Europe and the UK from the very start. You also obviously have, our Swedish-backed but German company, Helsing. Yeah. And there's some really interesting companies coming out of the UK right now. There's one in stealth at the moment, which has been getting a lot of interest, both here on the ground, but interestingly, a lot of the cap table is American. So I think,
it's here for America, undefeated.
The air horn is always ready. Yeah. It's always ready.
That's great.
I think, look, on one hand, I haven't changed my thesis on defense investing overnight. I still think that there is a monopolistic advantage that companies like Anduril will have here. But I do think at the same time, this does mark a real change in sentiment and opportunity around European and UK defense. And I think there are a few reasons why. I think number one, if you look at, pure dollar spend, Europe and the UK is just coming from a much further or earlier starting point. So if you look at the multiples in terms of pure purchasing and procurement, they're going to far outspend the US because they've been so behind. So on a pure kind of procurement dollar basis, Europe has to play catch up. So I think that's obviously going to be, a tailwind both for, companies like Anduril, but also some of the local players. Yeah. And I do think that it's kind of furthering this idea of what's called trusted capital. So the opportunity for the US and its allies. So certainly, getting in some contracts for a Helsing or a local company here in the UK. I think the second piece that's really interesting is that the UK in particular is behind from a manufacturing standpoint. So there's going to be a huge opportunity for a lot of companies to really onshore here. And that could be American companies who want to build out manufacturing capabilities here in the UK or across mainland Europe. And that is also going to result in, investment, dollars spent, and a huge opportunity for the defense sector. I think the counter to this, and this goes along with a lot of conversations that I've had with Brian Schimpf from Anduril, who, by the way, was having a lot of these conversations at Bilderberg in Stockholm a couple of weeks ago, across the Paris Air Show, and with leaders here in the UK and Europe. And that's that the criticism has to be that Europe has had a template for modern warfare on its doorstep for the last, several years. Putin first invaded Crimea in 2014. There have been so many blueprints for how modern warfare looks on our doorstep, yet the governments haven't really got the memo. This is really the first time that we're seeing governments come out with real new blueprints for how modern warfare should be conducted. So, the classic example is, Houthi rebels sending over drones and, the US and its allies having these exquisite weapon systems to shoot down these drones. So, Europe has really been asleep at the wheel when it comes to some of these more kind of modern warfare or scrappy warfare strategies. And I think that from what it sounds like from conversations here on the ground, the government is actually getting the memo now, which does clear that path for startups to enter with a different product spec. I think, not to talk up my own book being British, but I do think that the UK is leading the pack here. Sorry. Let's go. The UK has just done a strategic military defense review, and they're actually really taking some interesting steps in terms of how they're reshuffling, how they organize the military. And, I think some great work's been done here on the ground with, it was UK Tech Week a week ago, and, Matt Clifford, who's an advisor to the Prime Minister, talked specifically about how there is going to be an opportunity to have $1 trillion market cap out of the UK. And he actually mentioned that, defense really could be somewhere that we could see that happen. So what
about British dynamism? Is there a groundswell of excitement on the ground in Europe? You have some great manufacturers: Bentley, Rolls-Royce, Aston Martin, and then you also have ARM. So the computing,
ARM is
computing history as well. So it does feel like there's still some very
We just got a new head of MI6. So the one public facing, who was a woman, actually the first ever chief of MI6. And her role actually at MI6 had previously been Q. So I don't know if you follow the James Bond films, but her background is in
That's
technology.
not just Hollywood creation.
I thought that was entirely for the cinema.
Well, I mean, I think that
the world is just cinema, John. It's the greatest cinema of all time.
Yeah.
That would be the adjacent role that she had before. And so, but C, which is the name that is given to the bureau chief, that is the one front-facing full role of MI6. So, but she obviously does have a background in that space, and so I think it is very interesting. And it would be remiss to say that the UK has got a fantastic R&D sort of heritage. Whether it be in AI, obviously we've talked about this before, Demis, and deep minds, and a lot of machine learning talent. We've also had incredible stuff in robotics and synthetic biology. There's some really fantastic R&D centers outside of London, Oxford, Cambridge, Bristol, and actually we also saw some exciting news in the autonomous vehicle space about a week ago with UK company called Wave, who announced their first public road rollout of autonomous vehicles on public roads, which is going to be in partnership with Uber, which is going to be the first time we have like a Waymo equivalent experience, witnessing them on the streets of London. So so
I think we're going to have, it's Alex Kendall from Wave as the CEO. I think we're going to have him on the show soon, which I'm excited about.
He's great. And also I think if you look at some of the work that, again, advisor to Downing Street, Matt Clifford, has done, the government came out with this AI opportunities plan at the beginning of the year. And in the spending review last week, the UK committed to spend, I think, $2 billion, or maybe it's 2 billion pounds on AI opportunities, and a further 1 billion pounds for ARIA, which is an R&D deep tech body. So I think certainly, defense is one angle. We're also going to see continued interest, in autonomous vehicles, on robotics, and some of these really deep tech sectors that actually the UK has got a very deep history in, that, hopefully is going to translate into market opportunities for both local investors, but also US investors that want to get some exposure to some of these increased dollars that are going to be spent.
Interesting. Flipping back a bit to the Ukraine situation, is it possible that we see like a drone company come out of Ukraine? Ukraine has a long heritage of fantastic software developers. There's a lot of companies that have had like offshore Ukrainian engineering teams for a long time. Like the populace has clearly been very technical, but then the pressure cooker of the war has resulted in just insane industrial capacity. I'm pretty sure they make more drones in Ukraine than I think even China. Like anywhere in the world, they're making the most of them. Now a lot of them are like handmade, and it's not fully automated, it's not fully productized, but like my hope would be the war dies down, but then there's this residual capability that comes out of that. But have you heard any like rumblings about that, or do you think that there's any sort of like peace dividend that could come out of Ukraine?
I think that as I alluded to before, the Ukraine has really been a blueprint for how modern warfare is conducted, and I think that certainly we've definitely been following very closely in Europe what's been happening on the front line in the Ukraine. I think also, the Americans have also been paying close attention. If you look at a lot of the work that Eric Schmidt has been doing, especially since the US announced that its intention is to pull back some of its commitments to the Ukraine. I think you've had private individuals such as Eric Schmidt, really take the mantle when it comes to how some of these newer, sort of more scrappy drone technologies are being built. So I certainly think that is going to provide an opportunity for scaling across procurement on, other areas of the continent. I do think that in some ways, and I was talking to a defense founder this morning about this, there is an opportunity in this middle space. So I think that, traditionally we had these exquisite weapon systems, which were really, the luxury, pick your car of choice, the Aston Martin of defense.
The B2 Spirit.
And there we go. Okay. And then we had the very kind of scrappy, drones that are being built on the front line. And I think what is the really kind of sweet spot right now is going to be trying to fill out some of that gap in the middle. And certainly, if you look at some of the products that Anduril have been building, and some of the incumbents that I should say new entrants that I'm looking at here in the UK, they're really trying to fill that, not quite the very early entry sort of technology pieces, but that kind of one up, which are more affordable, and you can still use against, your Houthi rebels or whoever, and it's not going to kind of use up your entire budget. But it's also, modern technology. It's looking at technologies like autonomy, autonomous vehicles. So I think that is a really strong entry point for some of the incumbents, the new startups we're seeing now.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting wrinkle to the idea of like when you're ramping up defense budgets as fast as NATO is in this case. It's like the budget itself isn't necessarily as big as America, but there's so much new budget coming online that you're almost better equipped to buy autonomous systems as opposed to the United States, and the Army modernization effort is reallocating budget. No one's saying like, oh yeah, let's double it. Like we don't have the money to double it. Yeah. And so every dollar that we allocate towards an autonomous, we could. Yeah, but every dollar that we allocate towards an autonomous system, a modern system, has to come away from an exquisite system that has a ton of constituents, a ton of people that build it, a ton of lobbyists.
All the parts come from so many different states and regions and different senators that
whereas if you're bringing net new budget online, it's a lot easier to go with the newest and best technology that's actually equipped for the modern war.
My question is, will we see, a $5 billion company that just makes drones for defense, right? Like could a Neros be something like that? Or if you look at history of these contractors, you see that they often are the primes are obviously all multi-product, right? And so we will have to see how it develops.
Very cool.
I think what's most encouraging though for me is the sentiment has changed. So I think there was this hubris, right, amongst a lot of the, US and its allies, but particularly in Europe, where they just wanted to create these exquisite weapon systems that were really never designed to be used. And so I think the biggest shift for me has been kind of like waking up and realizing that this is totally unfit for purpose. And actually, you kind of look silly by having these exquisite systems that are completely, you can't use them. So I think that for me, when I start to see more of a kind of cultural shift in government, which is very rare, that's when I think you can start to see some of these impacts trickling into markets, and be it in the later stage or in public markets, but then also really kind of at this, I'd say, Series A stage at the moment, where you're seeing a lot of interest from US and European investors.
Very cool. It's really exciting stuff. We got to track it more. I'm excited to talk to some of those founders. Wave and Helsing, we'll have to get them on.
What other situations are you monitoring? There's a lot going on this week. We've been. I don't know if you've been following the prediction market space, but with the New York City, the primary was interesting. Is that? Are you paying much attention to that category? Do you think there's potentially opportunities for new prediction markets, or is Polymarket and other players kind of racing away?
I haven't been following it so closely beyond, it's impossible to, even sitting here in London, avoid all the memes that are coming out about about what's going on in New York. I think that, I think Shane Coupland is a fantastic operator. I don't know how much space there is in terms of, post deregulation of some of this space. You would think that there are going to be other entrants. I think that, Shane's created such in some ways a head start for himself and how Polymarket is doing that. I haven't been spending active time looking at sort of new entrants in that space, but look, ultimately our fund has a heritage of gaming, and so I think certainly whenever there's an interesting consumer trend that is unlocked, or there is a regulatory shift that can, I guess, impact how a consumer product is being built, then we do pay attention. But yeah, I've definitely been spending way more time on some of this geopolitics.
Yeah, what about you mentioned Wave earlier in the autonomous vehicle space with their UK launch. Are you expecting, has there been any chatter about what Tesla would do around autonomous vehicles in the UK? I think they sold sort of, I think they sold around 25 or 30,000 cars in the UK last year. And so it could be an interesting dynamic that we'll see with Waymo here in the US and Tesla, where Tesla has a much more efficient way to build a network where they don't have the same CapEx requirements as someone like a Waymo. And I'm interested to see if how you see that market unfolding in the UK.
It's interesting. I think that Wave has really been the poster child for autonomous in the UK, especially in recent years, and its partnership with Uber. They also have launched in SF. I mean, Alex Kendall, I'm sure he'll tell you about this when he comes on. Fantastic founder, has been spending a lot of time in San Francisco. I think an interesting story for me here with the autonomous vehicle space in the UK is that, much like I was saying earlier, the UK has a really strong heritage of deep tech. And there was actually initially another competitor in autonomous vehicles who was sort of incubated out of Cambridge. I mean, so was Wave. I think Alex Kendall took his first VC pitch meeting in his Cambridge dormitory or something. The law is perfect. But actually, I often use autonomous vehicles as an example for the government, because there was actually a front runner ahead of Wave at the beginning, but because it was incubated out of Cambridge University, I think it was Cambridge or Oxford. I think it was Cambridge. No, I'm ex-Oxford, so not to kind of hate on my connection. But what was interesting is that there was this technology transfer clause, which meant that the cap table got totally messed up by the arrangements in place from Cambridge University, UK government, which basically said for a product of this nature, the university has to own a certain amount in order to unlock R&D, credits or research spending for this company. And actually, it's a perfect example I use for sort of the old way of building technology in the UK, which was incubated out of these like very old historic universities. Enter then Alex Kendall, who also wants to pursue autonomous vehicles, and instead of going to the university or to the sort of traditional incumbent capital providers, goes out and raises venture capital, and is able to therefore scale much faster, build up the technology. I mean, again, these are not overnight.
Well, you got Masa on board. I'm sure that helped, right?
For sure.
Yeah, right. And so I think for me, it's maybe just an interesting anecdote which pertains to this sector about how maybe mentality in Europe is at somewhat of an inflection point. And I think that autonomous vehicles, is one of the examples where Alex Kendall was able to go out and raise venture capital and really, prove out some of these more kind of hard problem, the teal flying car, adjacencies in Europe. So I think, look, going forward, let's see. I think that robotics, hardware, deep tech coming out of the UK is not going to go anywhere. I think it's going to continue to see a lot of interest from US investors. I think that the fact that Wave have partnered with Uber is also significant. So the idea is that, it's not simply going to be, one company is expected to be able to do everything. I think that on a distribution and kind of regs perspective, it makes a lot of sense to have been partnered with Uber. And I think Dara was here yesterday. So yeah, so look, I'm
Awesome.
Let's see how the stage 4 trials go here. I think it's going to be a bit of a culture shock for the Brits here to see the cars driving
Well, I
around.
think you could have a culture shock. You put a Waymo in the streets of London and say it's driving on the wrong side of the road.
Well,
it's
no
all...
one would have a problem with that because Waymo is a Jaguar. That's a British car.
Oh, so it might feel at home.
But the Wave
The
car
Jaguar-
is built on the Nissan platform, which is extremely foreign to
I
the
did hear rumors though that the Waymo was going to change to a Chinese supplier.
Oh,
at some
interesting.
point. That was This
I was
is
really
a-
hoping they went
popular.
with Bentley.
Yes.
The Bentley Waymo.
Yes.
I mean-
Well,
The
we'll
the
pitch
Conti
Alex when he
Waymo,
comes on
yeah.
from Wave. We'll tell him, hey, let's
Wave, Conti.
let's rip out Nissan. Let's get on the Continental GT platform. This is
That's-
logical.
Exactly. We need some like James Bond approved autonomous vehicles on the streets.
Yes.
I'm a big Waymo maxi, so
Okay.
I'm just excited to be able to translate that to the times that I'm here in London. But
Awesome.
but let's see.
Cool.
Awesome.
Well,
So
thanks
great
so much
having
for
you on.
stopping
Great
by.
to see you.
This is fantastic. Have a
Have a
great
Great to
great
see you guys as
evening.
always.
We'll talk
See
to you
ya.
soon. Bye.
Bye.